Welcome to OSE Can You See? This show is brought to you by the CTV Society, which is also known and was originally exclusively known as the Society for Economic Equality. The Society for Economic Equality and the CTV Society being essentially the same thing, has existed for about 25 years. This show has been produced for 20 years, and tonight we have our Tiempo Latino series, and our moderator tonight, Pablo Bello, is having his seat, and our guest, Local Latino, is having his seat, and I'm telling you a little bit about the show tonight. And we've had a Spanish version. You can find that at CTV Society. Just search that on YouTube, and we have a YouTube page. You can find it on the GRTV YouTube page, and there are all sorts of episodes there, some in Spanish, most in English, and this show has already had a Spanish version tonight, and as we go to the English version, we're getting a couple extra panelists. Well, you know, Pablo, you are actually the moderator?
Yes. How are you?
So actually that is your seat,
You
Pablo.
need that. Oh yeah, that's my
his
seat.
Because our director will be somewhat upset if we switch places, so we won't do that. And our guest, besides Local Latino, we have a special socialist guest from Germany, and who's arrived to be on our show. Thank you very much. And his name is Mirko Toman, and it's great for you to come all this way and be on our show. And take it away, Pablo Bello. There you go. Or not quite ready.
Not yet.
And actually, Pablo Bello, Wolfgang, alias the Local Latino, and Mirko Toman, and I'm Mark Zapatowski, and you are watching CTV, and take it away, Pablo Bello.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tiempo Latino. This is a show for the Latino community of the West Michigan, and of course for the general public. Tonight we have our guest, Wolfgang. How are you, Wolfgang?
Very good.
We have a special guest directly from Germany, who's going to talk about Merkel. Who's going to talk about the crisis in Greece. And we have Mark.
That's right.
And my name is Pablo Bello. Welcome to our show. Tonight we're going to talk several issues. We're going to talk about the Hispanic vote, candidates, are Republican candidates. Somebody called them the carb clown, or clown, a bunch of clowns.
Carnival clowns.
Carnival clowns in their car, like.
Oh, and their little
Clown car.
Clown cars.
Right. Clown car.
Okay,
With,
clown car contest.
I think the driver is Donald Trump, and we're going to talk about Bernie Sanders. We're going to talk about El Chapo. El Chapo is a well-known narco trafficker in Mexico. He escaped from a maximum security prison in Mexico. Somebody made a tunnel for him, 19 meters towards the center of the earth.
What, and 2 miles long?
And a mile long, with air, electricity, and a motorcycle to go through the tunnel. Something fantastic, you know. What about, can we talk about the Hispanics, Wolfgang? And anybody can jump.
The Hispanics and election
Well, a
2016?
couple of things that I want to bring out is that, you know, the 2016 election is going to be an interesting one, because Hispanics, when you look at all the minority groups the Hispanics make up something to the effect of 19% of the population. So they're as a voting bloc, they represent a very significant group. Traditionally, Hispanics have voted Democrats, but the GOP via the evangelical growing numbers of Hispanics have been trying to woo in the Hispanic vote. Something else I also wanted to bring in relationship to this is that the situation with Puerto Rico going through its own economic crisis, $70 billion in debt.
Oh,
And there's several colonialist types of reasons as to how Puerto Rico got into that kind of a debt. But there's a huge migration, and mind you, these are U.S. citizens from the island of Puerto Rico to the mainland. So that's shifting also some of the political possibilities for 2016. I'm very happy that the miracle is here, because when we talk about political crisis, there's the European zone, and of course Germany being such a powerful banking, lending.
what's going
group.
on? What's going on in Greece?
Yeah.
To my pleasure, a lot of good things regarding there is actually a general strike being planned, which will probably take place by the beginning of next week, which is a result of the Greek government's giving in to the pressure that was put on them by the European Union ruling class. And I am very unfortunate to see that happening. But I also understand the standpoint of the Greek government, who had hardly any choice but to give in. And they have now introduced some measures that the mass of people of their population have opposed to. For instance, raising the retirement age and continue the path of privatization in such an extent that was not planned when the government originally has started their administration.
The thousands of people are going to lose jobs, right? Greece?
They have already an unemployment quota of more than 1/4 of the population.
25%, no?
Yes.
They talk about
Yes.
25% unemployment.
Yes.
Raising. I would say this is the wet dream of the Republicans in the United States, right?
Certainly.
Increasing the age to retirement, carrying benefits for workers.
What would happen to Greece if
Lowering wages.
if the banking collapse? They get no money from the euros, and their banking system, can they lift their drachos, their currency? Drachma.
Yes.
Is it possible for them to bring that up in time for, because if the banking system collapses 100%, what will happen to the people? How will the people live?
Yeah, there are certain scenarios that are already put in drawers, and actually there's one potential measure that probably might help the Greek population is to let them exit out of the Eurozone for a certain amount of time, because their economic is actually doing not so good to begin with, but then again, compared to other countries, especially in the South European part of the European Union, so namely Romania, Bulgaria, they are actually not having the same kind of pressure from the European Union that Greece gets. And I don't think it's the end of the world for the Greek population to be excluded out of the Eurozone, but it always has to be seen in the context of what actually the European ruling class,
there will be mass starvation?
what they're. I don't think so, because it is still a somewhat civilized country, and that won't happen that quickly. But the tendency is there, and that is something that needs to be fought.
What happened? I hear there was a referendum first, right?
Yes.
And then the president went to negotiations with the European Union.
Yes.
And he backed up.
Yes.
What happened?
When the left-centered government of Greece came into power, it was elected, and there had been ongoing negotiations ever since then. But now that we have been offered a deeper look in what really happened behind the stages, is that Greece was actually set to fail. So whatever attempts the Greek government had in reaching out to the European banking ruling class, as I would call it, they actually never had any interest in really achieving a solution.
to play the devil's advocate,
Yes.
is it fair to the fact that Angela Merkel has been demonized? Because, and I'm playing the devil's advocate, if Germany were to actually, yes, the German banks would suffer tremendously if the Greeks were to default completely, but wouldn't Germany actually be better off? But in fact, part of my understanding of the reunification conditions is that they were demanded by France and other of the allied countries to say, okay, you will support the euros. And so she has basically, to play the devil's advocate, she has been basically following up on that promise. And if she were actually allowed for just walk away from all of this, in the long term, Germany would be better off being outside of this whole mess. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that Germany still is one of the leading powers of the European Union, and there is actually a good reason why the European Union as a political structure came into existence in the first place. It was founded in the aftermath of World War II, where all of Europe was devastated, was in debris, and as a very good way to connect all the different European nations under one roof organization to especially extinguish the concept of nationalism, which I find basically a very good thing, is that many different nations give up parts of their sovereignty in order to work together more closely to build a common European home. The only problem is
That's
that
a very
the concept,
alien concept
the
in the
concept,
US.
the concept, though, had been hijacked, of course, by the ruling class, who has just turned the European Union
Who's the
into
ruling class?
into one big gigantic till, and which is not to the benefit of the general population of the different nations.
Greece and Spain helped Germany, right, after World War II?
There had been a tremendous kind of help that worked on a mutual basis. I'm not talking about that when Greece was occupied by Nazi Germany. They still have a lot of, they have stolen a lot of resources out of Greek, but the Greek government, the left-centered government, had never actually made that a topic. So this is actually considered a revanchist move, and therefore, even though they would actually theoretically have the right to demand all this money that was stolen from Greece, to be given back as kind of a reparation. But then again, this was never actually, this was actually never the topic. The problem is only that the leading powers of the European Union, who are representing the banks, not the people, they are demanding measures, and which the Greek people are not able to comply with. The problem is only that ever since the left wing, which is basically only as another form of social democratic government that they have, but still it's considered too much of a threat for the ruling class of the European Union, which is basically a right conservative. So if one administration that tends a bit toward, which leans toward the left, is succeeding, that would be a horrific signal for other countries who also have very strong left-leaning tendencies. So generally speaking, it is really not about how much the Greek people are in debt to other countries or to a certain bank system. It is only that the ruling class of the European Union does not want to see a left-wing government succeed.
Well, and this is going to take us to talk about the politicians here in the United States, Donald Trump, who's making these ridiculous statements about Mexican immigrants. What do you think, Mark, about these statements? So ridiculous. He's accusing Mexicans of being criminals, Mexican immigrants.
Well, the thing is that his statements, although there are establishment Republicans who are asking him to tone it down, he says he won't. And the thing is that this is what is popular with the Republican base. The Republican base was created over
a bunch of races,
over a couple generations to be a relatively racist electorate, really. Back during the Nixon period, Nixon had a strategy to kind of recolonized the South for the Republican Party by implying that the Republicans had a favorable view, to some degree, of their wish to have private segregated schools, for instance, of their wish not to have welfare for the poor or the black poor, to leave little signals, and this especially continued under Reagan. Under Reagan's administration, the Southern strategy succeeded. And what had been the Democratic South, the so-called solid South, became the solid Republican South, especially through Reagan, through the Bushes, that process was completed. And there was a wink and a nod to the former hatreds, to the very right-wing redneck, really, perspectives that were still alive and well in the South. And now the Republicans are bound by that. They cannot suddenly say, we need to be friendly to the Latino community, that it's okay for there to be more immigration across the southern border, because they've built the party in the South and in other parts of the country and with other parts of the white, angry man electorate based on these issues, these various hatreds. And so Trump, in saying this, he is building his support in the base, and the base loves it. But it's not going to win an election for them. It's going to lose an election for them.
The timing was very unfortunate, because we've just had this massacre in South Carolina, and so people's consciousness had shifted, and it was a racist type of massacre and crime, and so for Donald Trump he said outrageous things before, but saying it at this period of time when people were mourning about the deaths of 8 or 9 people who had been killed in a church while they were praying, it just rubbed, even for Republicans, it rubbed the Republican ranking file the wrong way, a significant numbers of them. So here they were trying to appeal to the base, just like you're saying, but at the same time, he was saying it at a timing in where the mood of the country had shifted.
Well, the Republicans have shifted so much of the electorate so far right, and let out signals for these last 2 or generation and a half, that it's okay to be racist, that it's okay to be angry with minorities or with the poor. And so they have really, through their Southern strategy, created these conditions that may have killed those people. In fact, I would say, if you look at it in the broader perspective, they've benefited by all of their poisonous language, and they've created a poisonous electorate. And that now they are stuck with it, and they can't win elections because of the demographic shifts that have been taking place. These Republican candidates can't win by broadening the electorate. They have to appeal to this very narrow and somewhat hate-filled electorate. And then when they do that, it's going to be very difficult in the current media, decentralized universe where everyone's got a camera on their phone. All of their foot and mouth statements from the primaries are going to be up there for everyone to see throughout the general election. That means they will not win the general election, so the race is really going to be on the Democratic side.
I would like to ask to our guest from Germany his perspective about these attacks against immigrants, Mexican immigrants.
And the massacre.
And what about the massacre? What about, I don't know, have you heard about this Republican candidate Donald Trump said about Mexican immigrants?
Yes, that was also the topic in German news, of course. But then again, who else would we have expected statements like this coming from Donald Trump, who as a person is really not so much a respected person in Europe as it is probably here? The general American opinion is probably, oh, he is a good businessman, he might also be a good leader of this country.
Who say that?
Many conservatives that I've spoken to. And while
No,
the
but-
definition
no,
of a
no,
good
no.
businessman
No,
is
I would
a person
say
that hires and fires at his own will.
I have to say,
can't be a good
I have to
president.
play devil's advocate here, in where at one time this is true.
Mm-hmm.
He was revered, and he has some books as a great
Mm-hmm.
businessman. But after multiple bankruptcies in various businesses that he had, he's not really highly respected. He's still a contender, but he's considered, in as much as the polls spiked temporarily when he appealed, like Mark was saying, to their base. I would not characterize him as someone that is respected at the stature of Bill Gates or some other famous business people. And I think to a lot of the high conservatives, he's actually an embarrassment.
Well, I think no doubt he's an embarrassment, and no doubt he went out on a limb by being very outrageous, and perhaps at exactly the wrong time to be so outrageous. But I think that he shows you the political profit that can be made by appealing to the redneck base that the Republicans have created for themselves, really. I mean, it's a very right-wing, it's reactionary. It's not a well-thought-out, intellectual, careful policy decision-making group of people, and throwing what you might call red meat to them can get you through the primaries.
Well, what's interesting, Pablo, to your question is that the business Hispanic group, they flex their muscles. Univision, that does business with Donald Trump, with the Miss Universe, they cut off ties. 15 different businesses who were afraid of losing the Hispanic consumer before even anybody asking them to do so. They cut off ties with Donald Trump. And then Donald Trump himself came out and said, because he has casinos in Atlantic City, and he says, I love Mexican people because they come and fly with their private jets, the rich ones. They come and fly the private jets. And of course, they were offended. The rich Mexicans from Mexico City, they were offended. And they says, well, if you feel like that about us, well, maybe you don't need our business. So he caught himself, foot in his mouth, I think, like you pointed out. And so it's interesting, the whole reaction.
And he has business in Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela, with this show, Miss Universe, and all this kind of stuff. I mean, he has a big audience in Mexico and all over Latin America, and he's practically shooting his food, no? Like this saying that
he recently, meaning last week, just a few days ago, attended a Republican kind of pre-primary season sort of meeting, debate kind of thing. And this was in New Mexico. And rather than backing down from his statements, he essentially made the statements again. And his Republican audience, in a majority Hispanic state though, but not in his audience, they loved it. He was the most popular person there. So I say I don't think the race is competitive from the Republicans'
What did Jeb Bush's
perspective.
wife, who's originally from Mexico, what did Jeb Bush have to say about that?
Well, Jeb Bush, in Spanish, I didn't hear him say this in English, but I heard it translated that in Spanish he said, I have nothing in common with those statements, and I disavow any sentiments of that sort.
He didn't say it in English.
But he didn't say it in English.
There is a letter.
He chose to answer it in Spanish.
Today I read a letter from the Hispanic Republicans. They are offended by what Donald Trump has said. Well, but you know what? I would like to now talk about Bernie Sanders. I would like to introduce to the Latino population here in West Michigan, Bernie Sanders, Democrat candidate for. He's very progressive.
For president.
For president
of the United States, correct.
He's challenging Hillary Clinton, who is another candidate for the Democrats.
And a couple of weeks ago, and before then, for 2 months, he was big news. And the big news was that he was gaining strength in the polls. I've looked through 3 New York Times that came out in the past 2 weeks, though, and I can't find what those poll statistics are. I also didn't find anything really very flattering toward Bernie Sanders. And so there's generally a media attack and reporting on how well he's doing in these pre-primary season polls has slowed down quite a bit. And I think that's because certainly he's a person that the media establishment and the establishment, the business and economic establishment behind that does not want to see become president of the United States. But Bernie Sanders, Thursday in an interview with the New York Times, outlined why he thinks that he may become president of the United States. And this is something that, I think is a reasonable expression of how it would be that he might become president of the United States. As he said, he might become president of the United States. And that is that for these past 2 generations almost, Americans have seen their standard of living decline since 1973. Increasingly, only the top 0.1% has been benefiting from any economic gains. Certainly the US overall is a fantastically wealthy country and is fantastically wealthier than it was when all of this decline for most people started in 1973, but increasingly people are falling out of their economic positions while the extremely wealthy are benefiting from transferring the economic weight of the United States to all sorts of other low-wage manufacturing bases. And it's not just manufacturing jobs, but all sorts of professional jobs, medical jobs, lawyering, all sorts of things through the internet now are being farmed out to other economic bases by American capital. And so Bernie says, well, people know this. This has been building up for almost 2 generations, and that reality is what might propel what you usually think of as the Republican base that sees economic reality as something that will bring them around to vote for the person who is really speaking to their economic reality and their anger.
This is incredible.
Along with the liberal base, that could propel him into a success over Hillary Clinton, who certainly, probably cannot, go out that far, and the Republicans who, they've never gone there. They can't go there.
Well, I read
war.
Bernie Sanders is doing something extraordinary, like in his gatherings and his meetings, there are like 10,000 people, like in Wisconsin. He's raising like
more than Hillary often.
Yeah, like people is coming out to see Bernie Sanders.
And perhaps, certainly the liberals are showing up, but I think he's gathering young people who don't see any future to him. What is still to be seen is if the angry, dispossessed, confused, white people see the benefit of voting or considering to vote for Bernie Sanders. And if I were them, even though I had been right-wing all along, I would look at the economic realities and say, well, it's time to just stop voting on emotional issues about whether or not I can fly my Confederate flag on my state capitol grounds, or whether or not I can buy a license plate to put on my car from Walmart with the Confederate flag, or I can close down all the abortion clinics in my state, or I can have the Bible taught as science in my schools. Maybe I want a real job. Maybe I want factories and economic employers, rather than moving to other low-wage environments outside of the United States. Maybe I want them to stay here somehow. And in that sense, I think nationalism is something that can be good, and people in the United States need to have a kind of nationalism in order to stop the decline and the deterioration of the United States before it's too
American
late.
presidential campaigns, the way the system is built, it takes about $1 billion for someone to actually run and successfully win the presidency. My question is, in my mind, as interesting as Bernie Sanders is, you have people giving $10 and $20 over the internet and social media. Would that be sufficient to gain enough momentum to actually win?
Well, as you yourself in another conversation we had pointed out, there's a 30%, maybe a little higher saturation of people who've abandoned the regular media and get their news by bookmarking their own sources and thinking about it themselves, not just millennials. And that is a swiftly growing part of the population. And actually, a lot of those people are these very angry, what we would have usually considered right-wing kind of redneck people. And so in another year, who knows what that will be. And we've never had an election where even a third of the electoral, the citizenry environment has been plugged into something that they're investigating for themselves. And so I think we're going to face a presidential election year that, in a way that, under conditions that we have not seen ever before.
Well, I would like to mention the positions of Bernie Sanders. Like he's saying to young people, I want free education, free college.
And he says, well, that
say
seems
that,
like
no?
a worthy goal. I mean,
That's
in many
very
countries,
progressive.
that's what they do.
He supports
And they give
immigration
free
reform.
medical care to
Free
anybody.
medical care.
And that would be great.
He's supporting taxes for Wall Street, for these super rich
That would be
people.
great too. Yeah.
And people is like excited.
Yeah.
That's why people is coming now to his meetings and supporting him and giving $20, $15 over the internet, because they see these positions like progressive, something that is going to help people here in the United States.
I think that we are too pessimistic. I think that most Americans think that there's no possibility that anything's going to happen except inexorable, permanent decline of the United States. And that is an attitude that Americans throughout their history have never had before. But I think that over this past generation and a half or so, that is the attitude that's been cultivated by the wealthy, and pushed onto the American people because it helps them to feel hopeless, so that they just entertain themselves and fritter away their time and their lives while people take what used to be considered the commonwealth, the economy of the United States, and do whatever they want with it, and scatter it willy-nilly across the world while it's being protected by the U.S. military, as some kind of an international property that will be protected by that.
Well, to your point about the Confederate flag controversy, as people were really engrossed in all this, the House and the Senate passed the TPP fast track, and the TPP would have more of an impact on people's daily life in terms of their jobs, their ability to have a sustainable community, to have an industrial manufacturing base.
As you pointed out,
Mark, I would like to hear the perspective of our guest from Germany about Bernie Sanders. What can you tell us about Bernie Sanders?
Well, I have known him, I have followed his politics already for the last couple of years, and I'm very excited and very enthusiastic about the standpoints that he stands for, because this is something that I, as a German, for instance, it was never a question for me whether or not I should go to a doctor. I could pick my own doctor from the yellow pages. I don't have any insurance companies that dictate me to what doctor I go. And I have just recently come back to the United States after living in Germany for a couple of years. And just the moment I flew in at Chicago and I took the L towards downtown, I have already just on that one L train, I have seen so much misery and poverty that it literally made me cry. And I can just not in Chicago. Actually, even when I walk down even when I walk down Division Street here in Grand Rapids, I see so much misery on the street that I don't think is necessary, and it wouldn't even cost that much to provide general health care for everyone. But the problem is only that this country, as how I see it, is just administered by a bunch of bankers and insurance companies. And even with President Obama and his Affordable Health Care Act, which was totally torpedoed by the right-wing conservatives, and as it is now, it has improved a lot. But still, I don't think the system in itself cannot be reformed.
So what happened?
It can be better, but it just cannot be reformed if the system stays like this.
Tell us, like in Germany, you just go to the doctor.
Healthcare is provided by. It is not. We are not a communist country. Germany is still a capitalist society, and these benefits that we enjoy have not just fallen from the skies. It was worked hard for and fought for hard. Because I think there is a lot. I cannot generalize, but I do think that there is still a larger sense of class consciousness, and because of the most Europeans have gotten used to like being more outspoken and knowing actually the powers that the normal population has over the ruling class.
What about free education?
But this is something I have. I'm talking about when I talk to my co-workers, for instance, like how much they paid for the degrees, and I was very lucky to have been offered an educational system where I only paid a small administrational fee. So for my degree, which is the equivalent to the American Master of Arts,
What did you?
I probably paid a few €100 per year. So for a 6 years course of study, and it's of course all financed by taxes. But the same goes for the healthcare. But if you look at the tremendous costs that the American healthcare system is costing the taxpayer compared to what Germany pays, is ridiculously exaggerated. But I think that the imminent problem, the root of the problem of American society is just the concept of capitalism in itself, which is a bit of a more tamed version of capitalism in Germany because of the higher sense of class consciousness, in my opinion.
And what about if we talk about Chapo? You know, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's a narco trafficker in Mexico.
Right. It sounds to me, from what I have gathered through the media, that it seems to people to be obvious that what this represents, his escape, represents official corruption. That if they wanted him in prison, that he probably should have been extradited to the United States, because you can't hold a billionaire or a trillionaire narco trafficker in prison in Mexico because he's as powerful or more powerful than the state in many ways. So that's what it represents.
Well, it's tragic. It's tragic because he was in jail, maximum security prison.
And guess how maximum? And not very, because of official corruption.
And somebody built a tunnel for him.
Well, someone had to give someone the plans to the prison.
Yeah,
someone
and
had
19
to
meters.
have him in his shower at exactly that time. You know, so because of corruption, the maximum security prison, perhaps the government of Mexico is a Swiss cheese of corruption.
But what you taught me today, talking to you earlier, Pablo, is that this huge deal that has been going on that has received no media attention, in where Mexico is a major producer of oil, and that has been a public resource that has been nationalized since the beginning of the 20th century, something like that.
Yes.
Unlike many other countries, and so recently has been privatized, and so that means that thousands of Mexican workers will be laid off, that the resources that were used for healthcare, to pay Mexican healthcare, will no longer be available, and that has received no media attention. So this Chapo, as fantastical as the story is, it has actually captured people's imagination and all the oxygen across all medias, and so something that is going to be far more devastating to the Mexican people, or more impacting, I should say, in terms of the privatization of the number one natural resource of the Mexican economy, that is getting no attention.
Yes, a few months ago, the Mexican Senate, the Mexican Congress approved the sale of Pemex. Petróleos Mexicanos, Mexican oil company,
Nationally owned, right?
nationally owned by the federal government, is on sale. Now, companies from United States, Chevron, from Spain, Repsol, they are coming to Mexico. They bring their engineers, they bring their workers, they bring everyone, displacing Mexican workers. We haven't heard about these massive layoffs for Mexican workers, but they're gonna happen. And probably this is just a small screen to cover up all this tragedy for the Mexican people, no?
You know,
Losing all the wealth. Plus, there is other institutions, the IMSS, Mexican Security Hospital Service, Health Services, is going to be privatized. There is another institution similar, it's going to be privatized. But now all the attention is on the Chapo Guzman, Joaquin Loera, Chapo alias El Chapo, who escaped. And all the media, even internationally, is getting all the attention. Nobody thinks about the thousands of Mexican workers that are going to lose their jobs, the thousands of Mexicans that are going to receive any more free education, health services, because Pemex is gone. No?
well, unlike a lot of Latin America, which has been increasing its independence from the American sphere of influence, Mexico has not been doing that over these past couple decades or so. NAFTA destroyed the several thousand-year-old corn agriculture of Mexico. Mexico produced its own corn in that countryside, and that countryside was devastated by NAFTA because the huge American mechanized corn producers were able to undercut the Mexican corn grown in the Mexican countryside, and that really fueled the massive immigration into the United States. Many rural villages emptied out. The population was gone.
When the NAFTA came to Mexico, was approved here in the United States, and it went in effect in Mexico, displaced thousands of farmers.
It seems almost like a plan, doesn't it?
They lost their way of making money, and
they
had
became
to immigrate to the United States.
low-wage pool for the United States. So
thanks to NAFTA, now we have Mexican experts in agriculture here working on the fields, picking up feeding the people,
Vegetables and fruits.
picking up vegetables, fruits. People who knows how to pick vegetables
hard
and
labor
we have this
experts,
clown Donald Trump accusing Mexicans of being criminals, and this is the same thing happening in Mexico. Now we have the smoke screen of Chapo escape. And in the United States, we have the massacre and the American flag and the gay marriage, while they are approving the TPPS, no?
Trans-Pacific Partnership, yes.
It's something similar to NAFTA, right?
The U.S., South Korea, the Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, and
Chile.
Chile is part of it?
Yes.
And then perhaps Canada, I imagine.
Germany?
Peru.
No.
No.
That's another partnership.
That's a different agreement. Yeah, that would be the transatlantic partnership.
As Elizabeth Warren has pointed out several times and seen in clips on this TV series, this will take away U.S. sovereignty to enforce its own environmental laws, because you'll have lawyers who will be able to say, halt, you can't do that because that violates the TPP, because we all have to have the equal, economic conditions, and this your laws here are not part of that agreement. We can insist that our investment here will have a factory that will pollute because you can't.
Now, some would say that the real reason for TPP is the national security threat from China, in where China has become extremely powerful because of our trade agreement with China. Their economy has gone up. but they're also the manufacturing base has allowed them to have a $282 billion annual military budget that they're really coming up in terms of technology, missiles, etc. And so the question is, wouldn't that be something that would be beneficial to the Americas from a geopolitical standpoint?
Perhaps from a geopolitical standpoint, but from the economic standpoint of long-term national security, it isn't, because it continues to promote the deterioration of the American manufacturing base, which certainly you have to have in order to have a healthy economy, to have a to have the wherewithal to produce a national defense machine. And certainly the Chinese are threatening national security in a way that's phenomenal. They're building land in really what is an open part of the Pacific, claiming it as their own, and on that basis claiming the entire South China Sea, which essentially runs from Okinawa down to Indonesia and from Vietnam to the Philippines. And this is the sort of thing that would have, over the past 250 years, driven the United States or Britain to war anywhere in the world. And it's a phenomenal
We have this complicated business relationship with them. Walmart basically, as they grew up in power as a corporation, it all was thanks to the Chinese cheap labor. And so they were able to get 30-40% of increased higher profits than before. A lot of corporate America followed suit. They left the maquiladoras over in Mexico, thanks to NAFTA, went over to China, and now we're trying to do this TPP, that shift away from China to these other 12 countries.
Well,
and even though this is it's going to be a huge problem for American workers, nobody talks about the media. No? Everyone is talking about the Confederate flag is coming down and the marriage,
our media,
gay marriage. We need to talk about this. This is some huge implications for the American worker. They're going to lose thousands of jobs. They're going to lose factories that are going to another countries, and nobody's talking about this. Right?
Well, and as Mirko could tell you, there's another agreement that is in the works that is a transatlantic partnership that does much the same thing. So our world is moving, under the shield of the largest sovereignties in the world in a direction that eliminates those sovereignties, isolates those sovereignties from the effect of the electoral power of their own populations.
Eliminate
nation state
worker rights.
Well, and other rights too.
We have this crazy governor from Wisconsin, Walker. He just passed this law, no? Oh, in Michigan too, the right to work, to eliminate
By the way,
unions.
Bernie Sanders opposes the TPP and the transatlantic partnership, and he does believe that we need to redevelop a manufacturing industrial base in the U.S., that we need to redevelop our own society and prevent this continual leakage and exploitation of our own people.
I would like to hear the perspective of our guest from Germany about TPPS.
TPP.
TPP, right. I'm sorry.
The Trans-Pacific or Transatlantic Partnership
Trans-Pacific
Agreement.
Partnership.
This is actually not so much thematized in the European media, but the tendency, as Mark has already mentioned, what's in this kind of contract is almost the same thing that is, actually it's almost convertible to just the only difference being is, the one thing is related to countries that are across the Pacific, and the other thing is related to the countries that are across the Atlantic. Most Europeans, though, have a problem with that the actual population of the countries are not even allowed to see the text, what's inside these agreements.
Oh yeah, they said this
That
private
only the
information, right?
politicians and the corporate representatives are allowed to see it, and it would over-challenge the understanding of the common population. And
Maybe we need WikiLeaks here, no?
sure,
It's
and,
okay.
and this is actually one of the great benefits
We need
that we
another-
have from the modern technology, is that things like this can't be hidden from the public on a long-term basis.
We need Assange here finding another leak and
But he's stuck in London.
There's a
in
there's a
Peruvian
reason why
embassy.
he's stuck in that embassy.
we need more
Yes.
we need more heroes to
Or is it Bolivian embassy?
Wasn't the
penetrate to-
TPP leak by actually WikiLeaks?
I don't recall.
I believe that the part of it, I'm not so sure if all of it, but part of it was indeed leaked out to the internet, much to the dismay of all. And then this is where a lot of people start reading the fine print and says, "Oh, wait a minute." Corporations will be able to have sovereign or right above sovereign power. So when it comes to environment or regulatory protections, the corporate powers will be able to supersede and have more say so than actual citizens or politicians.
If you remember, the right-wing people were, and I was one of these people who looked at them and said, "Oh, how paranoid, how bizarre! They think we're losing our sovereignty, and that the right wing is, going to give us away to international agreements and to the UN and all this kind of thing." But
The Tea
you
Party,
know what?
right?
These people are very. I think these are the people, and there are a lot of them, and they're on the internet looking for their own news. Bernie can appeal to these people because they can see that he's someone who will oppose these agreements, and they've had enough of these things.
Well, even though it seems like we're jumping from topic to topic, this is all related.
Oh yeah.
All these agreements are affecting the whole world.
Privatization.
No only United States. It's affecting Mexico. It's affecting China. It's affecting Chile, Latin America, Asia. It seems like everyone is in the same boat, and we need to take action and elect Bernie Sanders.
I think so too. I'm wondering if in Europe, if there are movements to bring a level of sovereignty to the individual voters, so that they can see these texts to agreements, so that they can, or is this just all, oh well, we don't have sovereignty, we're willing to not have
And
political
one more
sovereignty.
thing, while in Mexico, the Mexican government is using the Chapo, this narco trafficker, escape to get attention from the main topics, what is important for the people. Here they take the flag down, the Confederate flag. No, I don't want to say this is something bad, but it's just getting attention from main topics, from main information that's really important, like this TPP trade agreement, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's almost time to go. I want to thank our guest, Wolfgang. Thank you very much for coming to our show. Our guest from Germany.
Has been an honor to me.
Special guest. Can you
Mirko?
tell us?
Thanks for having me here.
Can you tell us your name?
Mirko.
Mirko. And Mark, thank you for coming to Tiempo Latino. This is a show for the Latino community and from the general public, of course. Please let us know what's going on, what topics you want to see, what do you want to see in this show, what do you want us to talk about in this show. Tell us if you like the show. We have this phone number, 616-459-4881. Call us and let us know what's going on. What would you like to see in this show?
Oops,
And
we forgot about the call-in.
oh yeah,
Right?
we forgot.
Yeah,
but,
we forgot. Sorry about that. Yes.
That's okay.
We got very wrapped up.
We have a
Next
good
time.
time here. Next time, call us. Let us know what's going on.
Perhaps you could leave a comment on our YouTube site, CTV Society, all lowercase, all one word. All the shows are there. There's a GRTV YouTube site as well. Lots of shows there. You find our series there as well.
Yeah, we are on Facebook. We are on YouTube. We can you can see this show in Facebook. You can see in YouTube también. Also, gracias. Este es Tiempo Latino. And what else? Thank you for coming.
And next
Thank you
time we'll
for-
remember to turn the telephones on.
And thank you for
Sorry about that.
for talking about this